Hope you had a good sleep. With this sincere greetings, we will start today's class. As I mentioned yesterday, it is very helpful to start the day or the event that we engage in through our body, speech, and mind, whether there are daily routine activities or some form of special event. It is always engaged with these activities to positive mind, traditionally called positive motivation intention. And positive motivation intention, according to one's own mental capacity, mental capability, not pretending, not sort of mimicking, but from individuals, from the bottom of heart, how we are going to spend the day, how we are going to, engage, in this case, sharing the Dharma, listening, contemplating, discussion, and also experiencing the teachings that Buddha had given and subsequent many great teachers have given, and to share here. And through that sharing, what we experience within our mental continuum. So engaging in these activities with a positive mind, with a constructive mind, will be extremely helpful. And here, initially, we need to put efforts to start to engage with the positive mind, very intentionally, very deliberately bring positive minds, positive, the intention. Like, for example, very strongly from the bottom of our heart, thinking today, on this particular day, I will not engage in deliberately, intentionally, in harmful activities, harmful to myself and harmful to others, immediately and long term. Setting that kind of motivation, how we are going to spend the day, is very, very helpful. And during the day, very briefly connecting once again to, connecting to that motivation, the intention that we set. And occasionally our activities of the body, speech, and mind starting to go against to the morning motivation that we set. Then try to avoid as much as we can. Try to avoid against that motivation. On top of that, when our setting motivation get more, advanced, then thinking not just intentionally, deliberately, not going to harm, but if it is possible, to support others. Others can be our family members, friends, colleagues, or that can be strangers on the street. If there's opportunity, if there's a chance, if I can, deliberately, intentionally, I'm going to support them. Whatever small that might be, I'm going to support. That setting, that kind of motivation in the morning is very, very helpful. And it is the part of the yesterday, one of the terms that we use, taming the mind. Or another term that I'm going to talk a little bit today is training the mind. And that is, how to tame the mind, how to train our mind is through, this kind of simple, the day by day train, setting that kind of motivation will be very, very helpful. So I will encourage you, people who are not necessarily following a particular spiritual tradition, setting that kind of intention will be very, very helpful. Then, of course, people who have a spiritual path to follow, then set your motivation, intention according to that spiritual path. And in here, some of us follow the teachings of the Buddha. In that case, the taking refuge, holding the mind, taking refuge to the Buddha as a teacher, as a mentor, taking refuge to the Dharma as an application to be experienced within ourselves, to be applied in our daily activities. And in taking refuge in Sangha, treating, seeing, relating those Sangha members as a spiritual friends, supporters. And holding that mind in the morning and during the day, briefly reminding ourselves whenever we can. And that will help as a follower of the teachings of the Buddha, our daily activities, of the body, speech, and mind go close to the teachings of the Buddha, and we will it will receive the benefits of the following the teachings of the Buddha. And among us, some of us follow the Bodhisattva teachings. In that case, on top of the mind taking refuge in three jewels, it is also helpful to hold the altruistic awakened mind, bodhicitta. The mind genuinely, sincerely cares, concerns, well-being of all living beings. Mind which has ability to treat others' well-beings, if not more important than one's own well-beings, but treat, think, feel others' well-beings are equally important as one's own well-being. That kind of altruistic mind, very deliberately, very intentionally, they're bringing in our mental continuum in the morning, during the day, will be very, very helpful. In short, in the morning or the beginning of an event like this, always try to engage with a positive motivation or the intention, and initially, as I mentioned just earlier, need to very deliberately bring that, and eventually, after a few years, that will become part of our everyday way of thinking, way of motivating ourselves, very, very helpful to ourselves and others who share our lives. So with that, I'll say the refuge and bodhicitta lines 3 times in Tibetan. People who like to follow, do that. Sāngye chötāṃ sōyī chōng chāngchū pātō dāni yāsū chē dāgī chīn sōyī bē sōnāṃ yī dōlā pēnjē sāngye dōpārā shō. Sāngye chötāṃ sōyī chōnāṃ chāngchū pātō dāni yāsū chē dāgī chīn sōyī bē sōnāṃ yī dōlā pēnjē sāngye dōpārā shō. Sāngye chötāṃ sōyī chōnāṃ chāngchū pātō dāni yāsū chē dāgī chīn sōyī bē sōnāṃ yī dōlā pēnjē sāngye dōpārā shō. Oh, yeah. So, yesterday we started to talk on this subject, nature of the mind, and today I'll continue from there. briefly to recap some of the points which are very, very helpful all the time, whatever subject, whatever topic that we are studying, that we are meditating on, the importance of reminding ourselves that our current, this existence, the life that we have, is extremely capable life, though there are many challenges, difficulties that we face. And that is the nature of the life, from the small creatures to all the way up to what I usually, when I was in UK those days, and English Queen was there. That's one of my examples. In the UK, in the human beings, from the homeless people, and to the Queen, and now it's King. We all share some of the basic what you call things. We all share the same. Life is extremely precious, but also extremely complicated. And that is we all share. So though it's not perfect, but we can use this human existence, this rich human minds, thoughts, emotions, to benefit to ourselves and to benefit to others, as I mentioned yesterday several times. When we look around externally, what we have, what human beings have achieved, particularly last, 300-400 years, what we have achieved externally. Whenever I fly up there in the aeroplane, more than 35, 40 feet up there, the thousands of kilos carrying up. And that kind of engine, that kind of machine created by the human beings. And nowadays, even though with these technologies, these gadgets, now we are worrying about this artificial intelligence may take over us. So these all are created by human beings. Some of those technologies that we have, or some of even not having those technologies, but 100 years ago, 200 years ago, some of those amazing paintings, buildings, if we look around, that indicates we are extremely capable. And also, not that many, but when we look back to the human history, there have been many great human beings, came in on this planet, done amazing things. Not only, I'm not just talking about the Buddha, but there were many, many great teachers in the past as well as at the present. So this human mind and body basically same characteristics, same capabilities with these great people. And I think 2007, I came with a group of my friends from UK and other parts of the world to do the pilgrimage in India. We did 3 or 4 times. I think that was 2010 or 7 we came. And when we were at the Kushinagara, where the historical Buddha passed away, and one morning we stayed there 3 days, and I think the second morning I woke up quite early and we went for a long walk, because that place is not as busy as here, Bodh Gaya or Sarnath. It's relatively quiet. So I went for a long walk, and from the long distance, a tall man in his 70s or 80s years old, man coming towards my direction, quite long distance. And somehow my mind clicked in the sense, when historical Buddha was wandering in this area, he might be in that kind of shape, relatively tall, and not necessarily he has all those funny things that we put. So that really strikes me at that, just in a short moment, that I'm in the same planet where the historical Buddha came and did these amazing things. And of course we can talk about some mystical side, otherwise he might be he may struggle the same things that I was struggling. So that is something that we need to, we need to remind ourselves. One of my teachers, I have several great teachers. Now they're all passed away. And of course, he's on his Lama's here. Otherwise, most of those great teachers passed away. One of my great teachers, whom I have a very close connection. I will say lots of teachings from him, but quite often, we work as brothers. And very often, when I was as a student there, very often I mourn, I complain, either saying, that my study is not going well, I didn't get good mark, I didn't manage to defend my, the thesis, and so on and so forth. And his, advice is always saying, he will say, that purity or the quality will occur from the difficulties. So that is, I find all the time, that extremely helpful. Still, whenever, very often, when I face challenges, which very often that happens, his advice, saying that, that purity or excellence will come from the difficulties, from the challenges, and that is very, very helpful. So therefore, always try to remind ourselves, though this body, this mind is not perfect, but if I utilize them properly with mindfulness, with the conscientiousness, this based on this body and based on this mind, I can do amazing things to myself and to others. Then that's not going to happen like this, not going to happen in a few months or a few years. With the consistency, if we work bit by bit by bit, like the example, the morning setting the positive motivation. Like the people who follow the teachings of the Buddha. I'm talking about myself. When we face challenges, particularly challenges from inner world, how much I apply the teachings of the Buddha. Some of those very, very effective, powerful teachings dealing, as I briefly mentioned yesterday, those three poisons: ignorance, attachment, and aversion. Out of these three poisons, when the challenges occur, particularly at the mental level, then manifest verbal, physically. How much I apply the Dharma, the teachings that Buddha had given. And that is really here, not just the people who follow the teachings of the Buddha in general, they're extremely helpful to grab gently, but what they in English there's a particular expression, slowly and surely. Is it like that? Yeah, that is what we need. Not forcefully, but gently, but surely, that not procrastinating, then we will see the benefits. When we taste the benefits of applying these teachings, I'm not just talking about the teachings of the Buddha, but these great teachers' teachings. When we really start to taste the genuine benefits, then the enthusiasm will grow to pursue that. Application will grow. Many of us currently need lots of pushing to apply the teachings because we haven't tasted the benefits of the teachings by ourselves. Many of our current, understanding, or as I used yesterday, the term noting the benefits of the application of the teachings are very much, in Tibetan there is an expression. It says, me se. Me means me referred to human beings, or in this case, in the nice, smooth expression is, oh, others say that there's benefits. That is not, as I mentioned yesterday, it's not powerful enough to become very, willingly, very naturally to go to apply the teachings in our daily life. So we need to, get a little bit genuine taste by ourselves, and taste will come when we apply the Dharma, the teachings, such as I mentioned, the small example, the same example, setting the right morning, positive morning, positive morning intention, once, twice, 3 times, and during the day briefly touching that, because that we human beings have the ability to remember the past. Many other species, they don't have that much. Though elephants, some mammals, they do, but we humans have a more power to recall. So that, His Holiness Dalai Lama says once he was in, I think in Copenhagen in Denmark. I was with a group of people following with him, and during that time there was a quite unfortunate, the communal, what you call it, infighting in Sri Lanka. There were, some even Buddhist monks were sort of involved in the communal fighting. And one of the question and answer, with the media, I was there, and one lady asked, why it's happening? Even the Buddhist monks are involved in the communal infighting in Sri Lanka. And His Holiness says, that they may not be recalling, or they may not be remembering the Buddha's face. He said, as soon as, in his case, he said, as soon as the face of the Buddha, comes in there, or if they remember that, that's not going to happen. Causing, disharmony within the community will not going to happen. So like that, people who follow the teachings of the Buddha, as a human beings, we are able to recall, remember the image of the Buddha. Very, very helpful. So this first point, I'm repeating again from yesterday. Remember this human existence, though it's not perfect, but it is extremely capable. And utilize that as much as we can. That's one thing. Another thing that I'm going to repeat again is understanding of nature of impermanence. This human existence is very, very capable, has great potential, but it is not going to last forever. In fact, some of the Buddhist teachers have made 3 points in connection with this. particularly with this, the existence of this life. Our current existence of life, this life, they're definitely going to end. And when it is going to end, the time when it's going to end, not sure, might be few decades, or might be tomorrow, or even few hours after, hours now. Nobody knows. So those are the 2 points. But then people who, follow, or people who believe, that after death, then the 3rd point, when death comes, when the what you call the end comes, only those, the positive things that we have done may help. Other collections are just, need to leave behind us. So those are the 3 points. Many great Buddhist teachers, there are different ways to do that, but some of those great Tibetan Buddhist teachers, they encourage their followers to recall, to meditate on those 3 points. If I use the traditional statement, that is, death is definite, time of the death is indefinite. When it comes, only those positive things that we have done may help. So those are the 3 very, very powerful points to be reflected on. As yesterday, someone asked, what is the antidote, direct antidote to those 3 poisons, such as attachment. This meditation, this application is extremely powerful antidote to deal with attachment. Some other traditions do slightly different. For example, in the Pali Canon, the 4 foundations of the mindfulness, there are several different versions in the Canon Sutta, Satipatthana Sutra. There are some are quite extensive, some are quite short, some are in the middle. Then, when the application, the mindfulness of the body, some are quite dramatic, isn't it? Going to cemetery, physically, the observing the dead body, decaying body, and so forth. So these are the sometimes, as I mentioned yesterday, when we reflect on, when we meditate on, think about, may cause uncomfortable, difficult, because we have this grasping to our body, grasping to our life, grasping to our possession, grasping to all our whatever we know those things. And as soon as we hear, one day definitely we are going to separate from them, We need to leave everything behind us. Not easy. Not easy. So here the point what I'm making is the combining these two, as I yesterday briefly used an dramatic example. You may remember, somebody lends you a Ferrari car that you really want to drive. Like that. This human existence is, if I use the actual Buddhist phrase, precious human life. Precious in the sense has tremendous potential to do meaningful, useful things to ourselves, to others, and to others. For example, the cultivation of mindfulness, cultivation of compassion, altruism. These amazing mental qualities can be developed based on this body, based on this mind. In that sense, it is great, very, very precious. It is said in the Buddhist scriptures, cultivation of great compassion or altruism is only possible with this human existence. Even some other, according to the Buddhist teachings, even some other better existence, better in the sense, better than the human existence, don't have opportunity or capability to practice, to enhance these amazing mental states. Love, compassion, altruism. Of course, here, when I say the amazing to these mental states, amazing in the sense when people understand the values or the usefulness, meaningfulness of these mental states. People who don't know that or don't care those, then not necessarily, these are, if I explain based on this human body, based on this human existence, we are able to develop these, the great compassion, love, altruism. People who don't see the value, don't understand the value, then they may say, then what? So here, that is important. So with this understanding of the potential, great potential of this existence, human existence, and its nature of impermanence. These two, the contemplation, meditation, understanding of these 2 points will be very, very powerful to reduce many of our mental difficulties, craving, clinging, fear, concerns, and so on. As I briefly quoted yesterday, this great Tibetan teacher, 14th century, Geshe, in one of short writing. It is called the three principal aspects of the path. Lamsuk, Lamsum. I would say in Tibetan. Theo Nyaga Tsela Long Mebe Ila Bombe Seti Nangshinto. So these two lines. Theo Nyaga Tsela Long Mebe. So Theo, literally the point what I'm saying earlier. Slightly different terms, different terms are used, more, different terms are used. Other ways, what I'm saying is, what this line is saying, the Terjoro, that means this human, precious human existence. Nyeka, this I will say later. Then next say, Tsela long meba. Tse refers to the lifespan that we have. Long meba, that means don't have that long lifespan. The longest in human history, 116 or 120, something like that. So, in other words, this first line, Tsongkhapa is saying, the precious human existence, and that precious human existence will not going to last forever, if I put it in a more colloquial way. And this will not obtain. This kind of precious life will not obtain again and again, which is I haven't said that, because it is more like people who believe many lifetimes in the past, many lifetimes in the future. So I'm not going to touch on that. I will just stick with the first 2 points. Tejonya Tsela Longmebe, Yila Kombe, Yila Komba, Yi means the mind, Komba means the familiarize, that we discussed yesterday in meditation. To familiarize these 2 points, having this great potential human existence, and this great potential human existence will not last forever. Reflecting on these 2 points again and again, ila kombe, seti nangshento. That familiarization on these 2 points will reduce lots of graspings and cravings related to this life, things and events. Many of our fears, concerns, worries, hopes, all those, if we closely examine, most of those, the hopes, fears, concerns, worries, they are very much related to craving, clinging, grasping on, this life, activities and things. And if you look at these lives, activities and things, which I will come a little bit later, they are very, very temporary, very, very superficial, not very much long-lasting, not very much, the deep meaning. So our concerns, worries, fears, hopes, wishes are, only from this life, these short, what you call that, short-term purposes, they fulfill the desires, then we are not utilizing this precious human existence in its full capacity. So those are the things which need to reflect on, helpful to do that. As I mentioned yesterday, the main point that our topic, this course topic, the nature of the mind, is to taming the mind. Through taming our mind, then to make this life more meaningful, helpful, useful, and so forth. That is the main purpose, which yesterday when I raised this point, seems you all agree with that. So coming back to that. So that is morning, the general points to once again to share with you. And it is not, I'm saying, that I have the great experience doing that kind of reflection, meditation, but I'm saying these great teachers, including the Buddha, I'm sure other ancient Indian spiritual traditions, master also have, these teachings on this subject, and so forth. Here I'm familiar with Buddhists. That's what I'm sharing with from the Buddhist masters' viewpoint. Oh yeah. Okay. Now then, move to today's main points to learn the nature of the mind. So yesterday we focused, on started with saying that there are three terms I used: Lo, Sheva, Rigpa. And those three terms, which are synonymous, and but they all carry similar or carry slightly different different connotations, and useful to understand. What is the meaning of the consciousness? What is the meaning of awareness? What is the meaning of the law, cognition, law, and those things. And also briefly touched, they all share the same, the essence, their nature, which is luminous, luminously clear, or luminosity, sensation, and they also function. They all share the same function, awaken awareness, aware of the things and events, or knowing the things and events as they function. In Tibetan, Selshin, Rigpa, Selva, that is luminosity or luminously clear, Selshin, that is their nature. And Rigpa, it is the function, awareness, aware of the things and events. So first, I would like to add one term which I have already used many times, yesterday and already today, but they haven't set in this group. Another term which quite often used is in Tibetan is sen. Sen. And in English, commonly translated, saying mind. Mind, sen. In Tibetan, sen, and in English is mind. That term also some great teachers, treated as synonymous with those previous three, the consciousness, awareness, cognition, mind. They all, can treat it as synonymous. So added on that sense, mind. Now here the mind, consciousness, awareness, the cognition, from the Buddhist understanding, Buddhist teachers' understanding, and I think it is the same non-Buddhist ancient Indian masters, understanding might be the same. So here it is not some a singular thing or a singular a singular event. It is a individual sort of the term some teachers, the translators use, episode of events, moments of events. That I think is quite useful to know from the Buddhist point of view. When we say mind, when we say consciousness, when we say awareness, when we say cognition, it is a episodic activities, not a thing, not a singular thing. It is moment. Another term Tibetan is used, semgu, and in English they translate saying mental continuum. That term is quite useful. Mental continuum, not a just point, mind, or consciousness, or awareness. It is these whatever term that we use, consciousness, awareness, cognition, mind, whatever term that we use, it is useful to, from the Buddhist point of view, it is in consecutive events, mental activities, not a thing. They're quite useful to know from the Buddhist point of view. Now then, mind. From the Buddhist understanding, particularly, as I mentioned earlier, yesterday, some of those Abhidhamma texts, some of those, the texts, the teachings attributed to the Buddha, shared with the Theravadins, or the Bodhisattva and the teachings, in the Tibetan tradition, these teachings are called common in the sense, that sort of shared with both traditions, Theravadin traditions as well as Bodhisattva traditions. So in those teachings, the mind, consciousness, awareness, whatever term that we use, is different from the matter, from the forms, matter, physical things, in terms of their origins, where they, in terms of the origins, the mind, consciousness, awareness, their origin is not from a matters, not from the physical, things. And in that sense, quite often Buddhist teachers tend to categorize the mind and the matters. So those certain mental states, at this stage I'm using the term mental state, certain mental states, their function, their arising, their occurrence, heavily dependent on, the physical, particularly nowadays that we use the neural activities. Nevertheless, still Buddhist teachers believe, as long as the origin is concerned, consciousness or the awareness or the mind, their origin is not from the matters, not from the physical things. And that seems quite different from the explanation of the modern people, the scientists who talk about the consciousness. And that is something they need to understand or useful to understand. Having said that, according to the Buddhist Vajrayana teachings, very often it is said, mind or consciousness or subtle mind or subtle consciousness is inseparable from the subtle winds, energy. So wind or energy is matter, So according to the Vajrayana teachings, particularly some of the, the term that we use is Hasyoga Tantra teachings, then subtle minds, or if I use another term, the subtlest mind is inseparable from the subtle energy or subtle wind, lung. So in Tibetan term is lung sen chupatipa. Lung here refers to, some people translate energy, some literal translation is the wind, lung, sen, consciousness or the mind, chupachi. These two are like an inseparable entity, chupachi. So that is very different explanation, from the common teachings of the Buddha and Buddhist teachers. They're quite different explanations. And there are lots of teachings, lots of different kinds of meditations can be done based on that explanation, based on that kind of explanation, inseparable entity, inseparable nature of the mind and the subtlest mind and the subtlest energy. Based on that kind of understanding, then there are lots of teachings and practices. So we are not touching that much on this area, so we are focusing on here. So in this case, according to the teachings, it belongs to in this category, shared in the common, Theravada as well as Bodhisattva in the teachings. Then the original, as the originality is concerned, mind is not dependent on matters. It is, so there are lots of, the explanations, there are lots of debates, arguments, and that we can, you can study, coming months and years, but useful. How it is useful to know, to understand what is taught in here, very much based on one of the fundamental Buddhist theory or Buddhist philosophical view, that is law of cause and effect. Here I'm not using law of cause and effect, that a Buddhist term in Sanskrit, karma. In this case, I'm using law of cause and effect. Just right here now, I'm using this term, is simple rules, the rules of or laws of the cause and effect. That as yesterday we briefly mentioned, that all those things and events come into being, come into existence, dependent on causes and conditions. And I'm talking about, in that case, law of cause and law of cause and effect. So to produce certain result, the cause must have the same potential, same capability to produce that kind of result. Must for the mind, something which useful to explore. So that's the one thing. Now I'm going to move a little bit to category of the mind. So in our daily experience, we have these sense consciousnesses, which we all the time utilize. And also we have what in Buddhist, the term is used, mental consciousness. So in the Buddhist traditions, the one way of listing or categorizing the consciousnesses in operating in our existence, sense consciousness and mental consciousness. These two both are consciousness, both are minds, but they have a different sort of different operations, sense consciousnesses and mental consciousness. sense consciousness, we are talking about, seeing, listening, smelling, tasting, and, texture. Those are the 5 senses. And these 5 senses have 5 sense consciousnesses. 5 sense consciousnesses. Seeing, size, color, shape, color, and so forth. And that's through the eye sense consciousness, and then so forth. I'll not go through one by one. And then, according to those great Buddhist teachers, what they have used, say, mental consciousness, or 6th mental consciousness, 5 sense consciousnesses, and 1 mental consciousness. And those are 6 consciousnesses. So now, there are explanations about how they occur and so forth. These are not that important for us. I would like to focus on how much that we utilize within these 2 groups. The first group there's 5, and the second group there's only 1, the mental consciousness. 5 sense consciousnesses and the 6th mental consciousness. Among those 2 groups, if we closely examine, many of us, most of the time, only we use the 5 sense consciousnesses. The 6th mental consciousness, even if we use the usage of our 6th mental consciousness is only, many of us only related to the sense consciousnesses. The point what I'm making here is this. 5 sense consciousnesses, from the sight to the tactile that we use, when we use directly, or what we recall, what we remember, the past, or what we hope, what we wish for in the future, they all are related to the sense objects. Sense objects, like shape and colors, smell and taste, and tactiles, and so forth. So now the analysis is in here to understand the nature of the mind, going back to our main point. To understand the nature of the mind, to understand the nature of the mind, we need to analyze, we need to examine what kind of percentage in within 24 hours, what is the percentage that we use, our 6th mental consciousness. 6th mental consciousness. And when the 6th mental consciousness is utilized, which is not related to any those sense, not related to any sense consciousnesses. If you think yesterday's, right now, if you think yesterday's, what happened, what what we have done, and so on and so forth. The memory or remembering, recalling, most of those are related to the sense. Shapes, colors, smell, taste, and tactile. So until we sort of, as I mentioned yesterday, until we, like the onion, peel the outer, what you call the cover. In this case, outer cover are the sense consciousness, related to the sense consciousnesses. Shape, smell, color, taste, tactile, and so forth. And this is very clearly indicated if we go to in the West. Also, it happened same in here in India. Those department stores, they have the 5, 6, 7 stories. As soon as when we enter the main or the ground floor in department, those stores, what you have, it is very universal. In London, there are several relatively big department stores that I used to go. They're all a universal arrangement. That is perfume. Or chocolates. So that is these, I used to say this when I was in the West. Some of these people who do the research to how to display these the stuff to sell, they are very, very clever to know the human mind. They are very, very clever to know the human mind. So in our daily lives, 24 hours, the dominant mental activities are the sensories, not the sixth, pure sixth, the mental consciousness. So in that case, that in the Buddhist literatures, when according to the Buddhist literatures, the entire unenlightened existence is categorized into three levels. Our level is called in Tibetan the kam. The kam, that means deba. Deba means desire. Our realm, where we are, human realm, is, according to the Buddhist teachings, is desire realm, deba kam. So why they are called the realm where we are is desire realm. Our attraction is only towards the sense objects. Our mental attraction, our consciousness attraction is only towards sense objects. shapes and colors, no doubt, smells and tastes and tactile. So that is our attraction. That's where we are. And that's also how we are, from the consciousness point of view, how we are equipped. Those 5 sense consciousnesses are within us. And we are surrounded by the sense objects. And our interaction is only those 5 sense objects. So in that sense, in that case, we don't need to wonder why we have a difficulty to do the mindfulness meditation. Because all our existence here, equipped with these 5 sense consciousnesses, they're fully designed to go outside. And their attraction is towards outside. And it's very, very difficult to train our mind, not to distract our mind to the outside, to bring inward. So as I used term earlier, grasping, craving, clinging, all these are very much led by the sense consciousnesses and towards the sense objects. So this is very interesting to see how our existence, how the realm where we are is labeled desire realm. There are 3 realms: desire realm, form realm, formless realm. Entire unenlightened beings are put into these 3 realms according to the teachings of the Buddha. Vivekam, Sukham, Sumekam. It is very fascinating to look at those teachings. More we go, this other realms, less attraction towards the external senses, more attraction towards inward, like the formless realm. Attraction is towards inward, calmness, mental calmness. Still it is attraction, there's it's desire, but more towards the mental calmness. But our is attraction towards outside. So, the 5 sense consciousnesses are very, very powerful to deal with. In the group of teachings, what we call the mind training teachings. In that group of teachings, one point which is directly related to here, to train our mind. To train our mind, one of the point is called Ong. I will use the Tibetan term, Ongbo Godomba. Ongbo here refers to the sense consciousnesses. Ongbo. Go is door. In others, sense door of sense consciousnesses. Go. It is very interesting that these terminologies in Buddhism, quite often we use 3 doors. That refers to the body, spirit, all our activities, external or internal activities are taking place through these 3 body, speech, and mind, go through these 3 doors. So they are used term doors. And similar to here, Ongbo, here mainly go, they are referred to as a door, because these 5 sense consciousnesses are the door where we go. Domba has a meaning of protection, protecting our sense consciousness, not letting go wherever they want to go, not feeding them whatever they want, however they want, whenever they want. So they, really very much to working with these 5 doors, 5 sense doors, in others 5 sense consciousness, to train the mind, or indirectly connected to our topic, to understand the nature of the mind. We need to sort of, have a little bit of control. And control is not the right word. Westerners, they don't like controlling things. They want freedom, everything. So, to really have a little bit sort of power, not to let sort of, go our sense consciousness wherever, whenever, however. That's what here the term is used in Tibetan, Ongbu Gotomba, to train our mind. We have a little bit control to those our 5 sense consciousness. So we'll stop here for 15 minutes to have a cup of tea. session reciting the sixth syllable mantra, Avalokiteshvara's mantra. People should keep brave, talking about those two kinds of consciousness that operate within our this existence, and those two groups or kinds are the sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness. And within those two, majority of us, 95% or 99% of usage of the consciousnesses are mainly those 5% consciousnesses. And their domination, that obscures or hinders us to see the deeper, further, more like a basic nature of the mind. So, it is useful to know the power of the sense consciousness. Not necessarily by, that rejecting, and not necessarily, very forcefully against usage of the 5 sense consciousnesses and the objects, 5 sense objects. But it is useful, helpful to know, to be aware of their domination in our lives. These days, there are many, some of the earlier, when I was in the UK, those BBC presenters, some other television famous presenters, many of them have their own podcast. So because some of them I have been, I know not personally through the watching BBC and some other news, so I know them quite well. And one of the common, when they do the interview, particularly now the podcast, in the mainstream BBC, they would ask that question, but they quite often they are saying, what is your, the most sort of memorable sort of memory in the past? And I will guarantee, the person who responds, he or she will say something related to the sense consciousness, not related to the mental consciousness. And when I think about myself, if somebody asks me, what is your sort of memorable, memories living in London, I would say walking in the parks. There are many beautiful big parks in London, and I love walking, particularly in the autumn or the spring. Autumn, when you walk in the parks, you will hear the crunch under your feet, the leaves are fall, and this very gentle noise when you move. Or in the spring, that freshness, that very new, the spring flowers, the shoots are coming. So very much related to my sense perceptions. Or as I mentioned earlier, I may say, they say, I must confess this is my shortcoming, one of the shortcomings, many. When I go to Central London, almost 99% sure I will go to this, what you call the department stores called John Lewis, because they have a nice foods up in the first fifth floor, relatively cheap, but very particularly in the winter comfortable chairs. And if you go after 1:30, still the hot foods are serving, but majority of people are already gone. So you have lots of quiet, nice chairs to sit at the corner and have it, delicious soups and breads. So those are the things. So that is the indication, the power of the sense consciousness. And very, very difficult to go beyond their sort of, dominations. And that is here the point is not to reject, but the point is to understand their domination and how to sort of set the balance while using our sense consciousnesses, enjoying the sense objects, but at the same time to have a little bit strength to say, what, to say, to have the power to say, enough is enough. In that way, then we will see the little bit deeper level of the nature of our. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this morning first session, our grasping, craving, clinging, or if I use the other term, those three poisons, attachment, aversion, and delusion or ignorance, that we, experience, that other distorted mental states that we experience. Many of them, majority of them, really related to the sense consciousness. Very little purely related to the mental consciousness. Particularly the attachment and the aversion. That. So, in the Buddhist way of training the mind this is now, I'm going to use more and more times this term. Training the mind is very, very gradual way to train the mind, as I mentioned earlier. Then the reduction, minimizing, those distorted mental states, those unhealthy mental states, attachment, anger, ignorance. First, we need to know where they are really coming from. Where they are coming from. Definitely they are coming from the causes and conditions. They are not there without causes and conditions. They are coming from the causes and conditions. And from our case, I'm relating to the topic right here. From our case, most of these causes and conditions, particularly immediate causes and conditions, are very much related to the self consciousness. If we closely examine 24 hours of a day, we will see quite clearly. And in this case, the Western way of, what you call it, doing some research is quite helpful. Researching or examining our own mental process in the 24 hours, how often the unhealthy mental states occur, and what type of unhealthy mental states. Self-grasping, self-centered, attachment, jealousy, envy, on one hand. On the other hand, those healthy, constructive mental states. Then for like a week or 2 weeks, you will put in a chart. Then see, okay, these days we can do very easily, computer to set the things and then put the chart. And see, and then go back to again one's own, analyze one's own mind, as I mentioned yesterday. The topic, the nature of the mind that we are going to study, it is within ourselves. It is not something outside. So in this case, okay, the jealousy, envy is occurred today in the afternoon. Reflect on how it occurred, under what circumstances, what really triggers that jealousy and envy to arise. Then we will see. Most of the time, 90%, 99% is something to do with the sense consciousness. Same shapes and colors, smell, taste, tactile, so forth. So, to understand some of those basic nature of the mind, to really, as I mentioned yesterday, the impermanent nature of the mind. to stay our mind to that nature, to that realization, to that understanding. To go into that level, first we need to unveil some of these gross, hindrances, obstacles. We'll come back to this again because sense consciousnesses are very interesting consciousnesses for us. We'll come back to that again because on the other hand, they are very, very useful. Extremely useful. They're one of my, they're long-term, sort of very kind friends. An English lady, now she's in her 80s. She couldn't sing that much, but she's very, strongly, very, strongly following the Tibetan Buddhism in other tradition. But we are very, very good friends. Recently, I went back to UK for 2 weeks and I went to visit her. And one of the main complaints is now she couldn't read her Dharma notes because she's losing her sounds. So in that sense, very, very useful. So here we are not saying sense consciousnesses are rubbish. No, they are very useful too. But they are also extremely dominating in our lives. And therefore, taking lots of our times, energies, and resources, just feed them, make them happy. So that's which I will come back. Now, this session, I want to move on to say that the function of the consciousness, function of the awareness, or function of the mind, that is, integrated Rigpa awareness, knowing the things. That's the function of the mind. And that is very unique from the matters. Have you seen the recent I read in BBC News, health section, they were talking about, that now they are able to not purely, what you call the cure the badly damaged retina in our subject, deep down, but they are able to put some kind of small chips and train it to able to see completely blind people, able to see a little bit. It's quite fascinating to do that, and I think it is power of the technology, whatever. But the point what I'm making here is this: knowing the things in event is unique function of the consciousness. Matter cannot do that. Matter cannot experience the things in events. Only consciousness can experience. And only consciousness or awareness can see or understand or know the things in events. And that's the function, unique function of the consciousness. In Tibetan, Senti Chile. Sen is the mind, Chile is the function. Senti Chile. So when you say that, the function of the mind is knowing the things and events, that doesn't mean any particular given mind knows its object correctly, rightly, perfectly. There are many distorted, mistaken, consciousness. So there's a little bit, discrepancy in here. On the one hand, saying the function of the mind, the function of the consciousness is knowing the object, but at the same time to say there are many consciousnesses that don't know the objects correctly, understanding. But that is what we are saying is, the function of the consciousness, function of the mind is to know, but that doesn't mean all the consciousnesses, they know their object, they realize their objects correctly. And that's important to know, to understand. Now then, relation to the function of the consciousness for the people who really want to explore that function, and through exploring that function, to want to enhance that functionality of that functionality of the consciousness. Then here, another important thing is, as I briefly touched yesterday, according to the Buddhist, the teachings, consciousness is extremely flexible. The function is not just knowing the object, but it is extremely flexible. So in that sense, it is good news. It has a capacity to know the things, but also it is extremely flexible. So in that sense, it here, once again, to remind ourselves, training the mind. Training the mind. Lojong. Which is very, what you call ancient Indian, not just Buddhist, ancient Indian spiritual traditions. Training the mind. The term might came in a very specific time and a very specific connection of the teachings of the Guru of the Masters, but all ancient Indian spiritual traditions have this tradition, training the mind, to really giving good exercise to our mind. Like, for example, cultivation of samadhi, high levels of concentration is common to Buddhist and non-Buddhist ancient Indian spiritual tradition. Cultivation of samadhi, concentration, high levels of samadhi. So here, then coming back to this function of the consciousness is knowing the object, knowing the things and events. That means, okay, I'll go this way. In the Dhammakirti, that great Indian master called Dhammakirti, and another master, they usually go together, the Digna, two great Indian masters, who were the most sort of, scholars and also practitioners, and to explain the Buddhist logic and Buddhist epistemology. Epistemology, as you know, how the knowledge, the theory or the concept of how the knowledge is cultivated, or if we use the Buddhist term, how the wisdom is cultivated, developed. Buddhist epistemology. So this Dhammakita in his, as I mentioned several times yesterday, out of the 7 treatises, Samadedun, Samadedun, the 7 treatises, the most extensive one, Samadedun, anyway, valid cognition, treatise of valid cognition. There's nice examples, and also with the examples, 2 examples, and given the meaning, the main, the meaning. Here is because of the per se, the 2 examples. The example is once we heat the water and boil the water further and further and further, eventually it will evaporate, nothing will left. That's the one example. Another example is once we train our body to jump 100 meters, I don't know how this Olympic champions, how far they can jump. But they, no matter how far they are able to jump, there is a limit. And eventually they will reverse back. As I mentioned yesterday, when I was in London for a walk, I can walk 4 or 5 hours without that kind of difficulties. Now I'm walking. Time is not known how much I try. It's not going any further. It's reducing duration, long, the distance, everything. So there's a limit. Why? Because what this teacher, what this master said, because these are physical. Physical things, no matter how much you train, in this case, to jump, there's a limitation. And eventually it will, deteriorate. But for the training the mind, if you train the mind properly, there's no limitation. And particularly once it reaches at a certain level, then it will not deteriorate. Because the reason is given, it is not physical. So here, very interesting points in Tibetan terms, the Tibetan line, this Chong Dao Tree, Tertian. Chong is jumping, tree is the water eating. There is a limitation. In contrast, giving the training to our mind, when our minds start to learn, for example, be mindful, it will learn more train. There's no limitation. And particularly when it reaches certain stage, it will not deteriorate. And it is not just mindfulness, love, compassion, altruism, wisdom, all this. There's no limitation. Saying we can express our compassion at that level, not any further. There's no limitation. And these are something extremely, and if I use the term positive, and we should explore those. If training our mind to enhance mindfulness, to enhance understanding of impermanence, to enhance understanding of nature of dukkha, and so forth. There's no sort of limitation. And once it reaches a certain level, it's never going to deteriorate. Then it is very, very positive, news. So think about along these, function of the mind is knowing the object, knowing the object. And that doesn't mean every consciousness, given consciousness, knows its object correctly and unmistakably. There are mistaken consciousnesses. Consciousness mistakenly apprehends its object, and so forth. But overall, point here is this knowing functionality can be enhanced. Those distorted mental states can be minimized, can be made correction. That is something very, very useful to know. This teacher, Dhammakirti, in his second, extensive, the valid cognition, treatise of the valid cognition, it has 4 chapters. The first chapter mainly dedicated for, how the Buddhist logic is structured. Buddhist logic, Indian logic, and particularly in this case I'm talking about Buddhist logic, here is very much related to inner development, cultivation of inner wisdoms. So the first chapter is dedicated for that. And the second chapter is mainly, focused on the historical Buddha. The historical Buddha is a reliable person, trustworthy person, because if we learn his teachings, particularly the teachings that he had given the 4 Noble Truths, if we learn his teachings, then we can understand he is trustworthy, reliable person. So in that, this is all I'm giving the second chapter. Now the point here is this, and then in a specific area, And in various certain verses, Dhammakaya is arguing the historical Buddha Gautama is fully awakened person. Fully awakened person. So fully awakened person is, along that verse, that two lines which I mentioned. Unlike the outer material things, how much you train, how much you treat, they have a limitation. The training the mind, working with the mind, there's no limitation. So in that sense, what the Dhammakaya argued, the historical Buddha is fully awakened with regarding to the Four Noble Truths. Fully awakened. Quite often the English term is used, omniscient person. Sometimes that is a little bit misleading or not very clear, but it is very useful nowadays. Most people, they use the term fully awakened. Fully awakened in the sense with regard to the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths, as you know, it comes with the two sets. The first set is what is here, right here and now, which is, in the Buddhist term we call unenlightened nature. This existence that we have is unenlightened existence. That's the first set. That's dukkha and the origins of dukkha. With regard to that, the historical Buddha is fully awakened in the sense, knows what are the causes of the dukkha and the dukkha themselves. Dukkha in the sense that the English term is used, suffering. And the second set is, what if we are unhappy, deeply unhappy, profoundly unhappy with this unenlightened nature of this existence, authoritative existence, that is the second set of the Four Noble Truths. Third Noble Truth of the cessation of the dukkha and origins of dukkha, and the fourth Noble Truth, which leads to, or the path that leads to the third Noble Truth, which is the cessation, the third Noble Truth, which is path leads to the third Noble Truth. And those are the ones set. So that clearly, indicates in this Dhammakayati's, the statement, if we read the second chapter, very beautifully, nicely explained, argued, rationally given reasons, with regard to the Four Noble Truths. Buddha is fully awakened person. So now here I want to come back to ourselves. Ourselves, as I mentioned in the previous session, basically we have same life that historical Buddha had. So we can, cultivate, we can develop, we can experience fully awakened mind with regard to the Four Noble Truths. With regard to the Four Noble Truths. There's no, what you call the uniqueness to the history of the Buddha. He was able to understand, able to know, his mind able to know the Four Noble Truths as they are, and we are not. It is not the case. We have the same basic depth in the minds or the consciousness. So this function, going back to the main point, learning, understanding the function of the mind, the function of the consciousness, that is knowing things and events. I mean, it will be very nice to know all those external things and events. For us, particularly people who really search or seek certain levels of freedom from the attachment and the ignorance, seeking some way, some means to overcome these distorted, unhealthy mental states. Then when we are studying the function of the mind, knowing, awakening, is very, very helpful. Very, very helpful. Because, as I briefly touched earlier, attachment, aversion, jealousy, envy, they arise in our mental continuum through the exaggeration of on the things and events, or through what you call the rejection of things and events, and so forth. So in that case, here for us, learning the what you call the function of the mind is very, very helpful. Very, very helpful through, I'm talking about in a practical level, not pure theological level, more practical level. And this, I'm bringing that, the Dhamma, the second chapter, related to the Buddha, is good to, as a second example for us. So then I want to make last point before we have the question and answer. Buddha himself, the historical Buddha himself, had stated in his first teaching, the Four Noble Truths, the Sutra, the telling the will of the Dhamma. In that sutra, it is very short, just 1.5 A4, the page. That's it. And at the end of that sutra, when he finished the main topics, that's the Four Noble Truths. After finishing the Four Noble Truths, then at the end, there's a paragraph saying, with regard to the Four Noble Truths that I mentioned earlier, with regard to that, what I've said, if what I've said is correct, right, then I will claim as an awakened being. If it's not, then I will not claim as an awakened being. So for the, particularly in this case, people who follow the teachings of the Buddha, quite often in the Theravada tradition, unlike that tradition, they really don't like using the term attaining enlightenment, though that little bit tacky, grasping state terminologies. But whatever term that we use to experience enlightenment, and that is what Buddha said. Regard to the Four Noble Truths. If I'm right, correct, then I will claim as a enlightened being. Otherwise, I do not claim. Similar to that, this great Indian logician, Dhammakirti, in the same text in the second chapter, he says, whether Buddha sees long distance or not, whether Buddha in this case, he's talking Buddha, whether Buddha is able to fly long distance or not, that's not the point. To say Buddha is fully awakened being. Buddha is fully awakened being with regard to the Four Noble Truths. So that is something quite useful in this relate to the function of the consciousness, knowing. Oh yeah. So now we'll have a time for questions.
When you mention the difference between sense consciousness and mind consciousness, I understand it theoretically, but to give an example, I'm a little confused because the example that you gave, that the memory of walking in a park, is it mind consciousness because it's coming from a memory, or is it again sense consciousness because I'm remembering seeing the park and smelling the flowers of the park? So I'm a little confused here. Which one of the comes?
So you got it my point. I deliberately left in that confusion. You people to think. Yes, it is mind. It is mental consciousness. But if you look at the content is reflecting, relating to the sense consciousness. Smelling the autumn leaves, sound the autumn leaves and crackling under the feet is sense consciousness. Yes, it is mental consciousness, recalling, remembering, but the content is purely related to sense consciousness. So you talked about that, that's good. I like, the Western way of educating, because in the West, they don't feed you like a spoon feeding. They will give you a little bit taste, then let you go. Go and do yourself. They give you all those articles. So all of these articles, then go and read it and come back and write your essays. That's how it is. So here, that's true. But then if you go further, search in your, the function of your mind, mental consciousness, what's there? As in remembering, essay, all those things, very little related to the pure mental objects. Don't ask what are the mental objects, I will not say, but very, very little.
So a follow-up question on that. So in this example, it's a past lived memory, which is mind consciousness. And what if I'm imagining something I have not lived, but it's just my imagination or fantasy? That would also be mind consciousness.
Yeah, it depends on it is what you are imagining, what you are wishing. Yes, it is mental consciousness. But what you are wishing for, what? Very, very little.
Sorry, maybe I'm asking the same question again.
It's fine.
I couldn't understand mental consciousness. I did understand sense consciousness, and one reason maybe power has gone and the volume went so low, I couldn't even hear correctly.
So you're right. I didn't say what is mental consciousness. I just listed. I said there are 5 sense consciousnesses, and then on top of that, mental consciousness. And then it becomes, as a number, it becomes 6. 5 sense consciousnesses plus 1 mental consciousness. But I didn't say any further what is mental consciousness. I didn't say. So you haven't, of course, you haven't heard anything about that. So now here, according to the Buddhist, the texts, the 5 sense consciousnesses are, purely dependent on they occur, they arise dependent on 5 sense objects in the one condition. Second condition is 5 sense consciousnesses are dependent on 5 sense physical organs. So now to think about, is there or are there things and events that we can know, that we can recognize, which is or which are not belongs to 5 sense objects? That's the first thing. We need to, this sense organ is a little bit complicated. Just look at, analyze, search. Are there objects, are there things or events which are not belongs to the 5 sense objects? If there are, and what kind of mind or consciousness that we should apply to know that those things? Because object and consciousness, these two are interconnected. When you talk about objects, then there must be subject. Without subject, we can't talk about objects. So the first thing is, are there anything that you can think about which is not in the 5 sense objects? Sense objects, as we know, shapes and colors, smell, taste, sound, tactile. Those are the 5 sense objects. I'm sure there are many other things and events not in these 5. If there are, then what those things and events, what kind of tools can we have to know, to understand those things and events which are other than the 5 sense objects? That's the one thing. The other thing is, this is lots of argument within the Buddhist scholars, but it is good, as earlier questioners said, recalling, remembering, wishing, hoping, obviously not the sense consciousnesses. Sense consciousnesses do not have that kind of function. So then what is that? To recall, to remember, to wish, to hope. Obviously not any of those five sense consciousness. Must be, there's another factor in here. So in the Buddhist literature, that is the mental consciousness. So anyway, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
In the text on meditation, I believe it often says that to develop concentration, it has to be on the basis of a mental consciousness. But one of the primary objects suggested is the breath, which is a physical sense consciousness. So how do you develop concentration on a breath that's strengthening your sense consciousness?
I mean, using the breath, breathing, or the breath itself, or the feeling of touching your hands on your knees, or touching two thumbs. Those are some kind of objects to cultivate mindfulness or the concentration for the very early stage. I usually say this for the people who learn the meditation. In the early stage, it is quite useful to use some of these objects or the things which are right there. Do not need to, very deliberately bring forward. Then concentrate on it. Breathing is there. Touching is there. It's there. But there are traditions, for example, in Tibetan Buddhist traditions, clearly, in a very early stage, introduce visualization of the image of the Buddha. It's not, the physical, it is mental creation. So I think it is, the initial way to deal with that. Once your mind is in a stage of stability and the clarity is there, then it is better to use some other than the material things. Your concentration will get more intense. Intense in the sense not negative, in a positive. This great Tibetan master, which I mentioned earlier, Jefakar, in his great learning, he says, Selchata, nature, Mariya. Selcha is the stability. Nature is the stillness. So Selcha is the clarity. Nature is the stability. Mariya. Mariya. Here they translate it in English. Intensity. Intensity must be there. Otherwise, your concentration may dip into darkness. Mental sinking, subtle levels of mental sinking. So to really take your mind at that levels of concentration, then the object of the meditation must be subtler than the breathing. More subtler, the object of the meditation. Your concentration, stillness, and clarity become more subtle and stronger. So that is how, it is no doubt using breathing, movement of your belly, touching of your hand. These are very, very helpful for the early stage people who learn the meditation and object to introduce the meditation. I mean, I love to do the walking meditation. Simple 20 space in a pace up and 20 pace down. And particularly if the place is kind to your feet with the bare foot. It's very, very nice. It's nice in the sense, your mind is able to stay with that. Yeah. Okay. Any question? One more question, then we will break for lunch. Okay. It's fine, we can do it. Yeah, okay, yes.
Clarification.
Yeah.
Yes. One clarification. I understand the categorization of my sense consciousness
Yeah.
and the sixth mental consciousness, but isn't the five also mental?
Okay. They are also mind, they are also consciousness. You're right, as you can sense consciousness, therefore they are also mind. They are also awareness. They are also law, in other words, cognition. But it gets into different levels of the mental consciousness. Has a different, though they all six are mind, five sense consciousnesses, and six the mental consciousness. But because the condition where they arise, then they become different. A five plus one ones are sense, the sixth one is the mental. They all are mind. So this is maybe getting confusing a little bit with the term that we use mental. So otherwise they all are same. They are all six are mind, all six are consciousness, all six are awareness, all six are cognition, but different layers. Okay. Okay.
You said that Rinpoche, you said that the causes and conditions that give rise to unhealthy states of mind are mostly unhealthy states of mind are mostly related to sense consciousness. So once again, my question is related to what if we are recalling something that has to do with an incident that brings up these unhealthy states of mind. So then isn't the mental consciousness resulting in distorted states of mind? So how can we help ourselves then?
Okay. Now, it might be my lack of my clarity. At our level, I said, at our level, most of the distorted mental states that we suffer, that we, caught up, is through the sense consciousness. Of course, there are distorted mental consciousness that operates within ourselves. For example, self-grasping, self-centered mind, egoistic mind. These all are mental consciousness. They are not related to the sense consciousness. So, at our level, most of our distortion that we have is through the sense consciousness. That's mind. Is that clear? So, I want to say a few words before we break for the lunch. There is a nice verse by Nagarjuna. Can't remember which text. In that text, there's a nice, the text, I can't remember the verse is this, because we are going to break for the lunch. The verse is this in Tibetan. Kase mentam dewa Rinpoche. So kase means the food that we're going to eat. See them as a medicine. Kase mentam Rinpoche. And the Java Shetan never consume or eat without attachment, without anger. The Java Shetan never not to make your body more than healthy. Not the purpose of the eating is not make your body more than healthy. Not not to make your body to be very proud of. Just to sustain your body, I consume this food. And that verse is a very, very useful verse. When we are consuming, 3 meals a day, to understand, to recall that. As I mentioned earlier, training the mind is very much gradual process. Gradual process. It is not just, all our four, what we call the journal, which I'm going to talk a little bit something later tomorrow. The do, chap, nyam, do. Walking, standing, sitting, sleeping, related to the body. All those activities, during all those behaviors, we talk about, cultivating mindfulness. And similar to that, including eating, drinking, to consume those necessities with that kind of mind. Very, very helpful, I'm not saying, I'm able to not have an attachment when you have a delicious lunch, but it is good to do that. Train our mind, to all do those activities with the mindfulness, to eat, to walk, to drink, to talk with the mindfulness. And this verse is very nice verse about a very great master. Anyway, thank you.